Welcome to the Health and Wealth Power Hour, the podcast that provides you with the knowledge and insights you need to achieve physical, mental, and financial well-being. I'm your host, Harlan Pickett, a business consultant who's passionate about helping people achieve a more balanced and healthier life. Each week, we'll deep dive into topics related to health and wealth, including retirement income planning, innovative healthcare solutions, alternative funded health plans, and specific actions individuals and business owners can take to gain control of their finances, have access to affordable quality health care, and achieve peace of mind. We'll also be joined by innovative experts who will share their knowledge and insights on prevalent topics. So, whether you're looking to grow your wealth or improve your health, you've come to the right place. Get ready to be informed, inspired, and empowered. Let's get started. Well, hello there again, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Health and Wealth Power Hour. I am your host, Harlan Pickett. Great to have you with me today. Man, we got a good one for you today. It's all about time. Time. Is time on your side? Maybe it's not. Maybe it is. But there's one thing for sure that you can never get back, and that is the time that you have spent. It is also one of the most valuable things that you have that maybe you waste every single day thinking, man, I wish I could just get that back and have spent that, utilized that better. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a business owner, or just someone living their life. Maybe you're into retirement now and you're wondering, how am I even going to muddle through all of this retirement stuff? I've got so many things I want to do, but I never seem to do anything. Time management is what it's all about. And we have got someone incredibly special today, Mr. David Buck, the Infinity Lifestyle Design Program founder, is with us to help you understand how to better manage and utilize your time. David, welcome aboard the Health and Wealth Power Hour, buddy.
Harlan, it's an honor to be here. Thank you so much for investing time in us to talk about it.
Absolutely, sir. Whenever I first was kind of introduced to you through a platform that we use called Podmatch, I was extremely interested because of your journey in dealing with time and in your own particular journey in looking at how your time management wasn't where it should have been and how you kind of moved from that to what you do now, or what you did for a little while, right? And kind of in the workplace, helping to what you do now to help folks even into retirement and working through that process even before they retire to show them time management. I think it's so important for us to realize, and you and I talked a little bit about this before we started recording here, how many things we have in this world today that can waste our time, that can distract us so easily from what is truly important, whether it's business, whether it's family, whatever, fill in the blank that is important to you. And you know it's important to you, but you still don't give it the time or utilize your time properly to put it in its place. So talk a little bit about what your journey looked like, help better understand that, and kind of set the stage for where we're going to go the rest of the day.
No, thank you. And thanks again for being on. And my corporate life, I'm an entrepreneur now, and I spent the vast majority of my career in corporate life, and I was in business development. That's just another fancy word for sales. So we're salesperson. And I found early on that I knew I didn't have the startling, amazing good looks or the charisma in order to win the sale. And early on, I felt, what could I do? I was going to be better prepared than the next person going into a prospective client or client. And that preparation led me to see that I really was successful when I was managing my time well. And then I took it to the next level when I helped my clients manage their time well. And it's not that there was anything formal in that. It's just I tried to be so customer-centric in what I did that those people that I worked with I made their lives easier so they didn't have to spend a lot of time trying to figure out what day with the product or service I was selling. I made it easy so they could focus in other areas. That served me well. So there's much point that I then stepped out into entrepreneur life myself, started my business where I was working with individuals, companies, and teams on how they could be more productive in use of their time. But about a little over 2 years ago, my wife and I were having our semi-annual review with our financial advisors, and my wife asked them, I didn't know she was going to do this. She said, what if Dave retired tomorrow? And our financial advisors said, yeah, you might have to eat rice and beans for a while, but yes, that would be possible if you needed to do it. And that hit me like a sledgehammer because I'm like, what would I do with all of this free time? And so I started to use the processes in my business that I use for people, what I quote called in career, and came up with a system for myself on what I would do post career when that time comes, checked it with other people, and that really born the Infinity Lifestyle Design Program.
Yeah, I think the thought, any of us that are working, any of us that are just like you did at that time, you knew retirement was going to happen someday, but you didn't see it as a now type thing or even soon type thing. It's hard for us to imagine even in a regular day doing anything to give ourselves some extra time. And I think when we do look at retirement, depending on who you are and what your plans are, you have things you want to do. Even if it's play golf and fish. Now, I mean, I can tell you from people I've known that have done that that's what their plan was. That kind of got old pretty quick. You may say that's what you want to do and you'll never get tired of that. But 6 to 8 months later, I challenge you to let me know if that's still what you want to do all the time.
Very fair.
It seems like a good idea, but it's because they're not doing what you just said, right? They're not really making a retirement plan. They're not looking at all this extra time that they believe they're going to have. My dad will tell you that when he retired 20-ish years ago, the only thing that changed, he actually lost time, he says. He was busier after he retired than he was when he was working. The only thing that changed, he says, is he just didn't know what day of the week it was. Because he worked every day now instead of just 5 days and have a weekend off. Now he worked every day, so it didn't matter what day it was.
And that is a not uncommon that the day of the week doesn't mean as much to people who've been in retirement for a while, because the average working person's going, it's Sunday, I got to go to work on Monday. That's not even in the mix anymore for someone who's retired.
Yeah. Yeah. But once again, he was busier. He'll tell you he was busier. He had longer days, busier days, and it didn't make any difference what day it was. He still has something that he at least wanted to accomplish, right? It's kind of an interesting situation that someone would find themselves in like that. And he's gone through a number of different things that he's done in retirement. Once again, I think all he wanted to do at the time, whenever he retired, they lived in a community, in a neighborhood on a lake. And so he wanted to play golf and fish. Literally, that's what he wanted to do, is play golf and fish. That was all fun for 6 to 8 months. And then he decided, I'm bored. My mom hadn't retired yet, so he went back to work.
I want to say about over 20% of retirees in that 6-month time frame end up going back to work because it's just not what they had anticipated. And you know what? That's okay. I think, and the fact that he was busier more and still enjoying life, that to me is, quote, the ideal retirement, because as long as he has flexibility to pursue some personal avenues that he wanted to do, then why is that wrong? To me, that's a meaningful plan for retirement.
Okay, so let's step back to the working world. That most of the folks that'll be listening to the podcast will be in a situation like myself and yourself, entrepreneurs Maybe they still work corporate, but they're thinking about making that change. Maybe one of the things that's holding them back is they're very concerned about their own time management skills. What are some of the things that you have seen that people were able to overcome by putting together a better time management utilization system in place?
I would say, first and foremost, the way you are going to use and manage your time is custom to you. There are tools out there, but I just encourage everybody, there's no quick fix. So don't just say, gosh, if I do these 3 things, my life is going to change forever. Don't do that. That's not how I work with my clients. But what I have found, the average person, regardless of where they're at in their career, what they're doing, there are 3 main avenues that people struggle with their time management. The first is distractions. And I term a distraction as an internal, something that you allow yourself to be internally disrupted. It's on you. The second one is procrastination. And that is intentionally delaying on an important activity or task that you know that by delaying, it's going to cause you harm. And then the third one is kind of the flip side of the coin to distractions, and that's interruptions. And those are those external, particularly for those of us who are entrepreneurs or leaders. Interruptions come at us all the time from any place, and they're external disruptions that come at you that you don't anticipate. And so those are the 3 challenges that most entrepreneurs and leaders face, but it's pretty much general across the board.
Yeah, I know that one of the things that has helped me is I set a certain time of day that I will do emails.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, unless I'm anticipating a specific email on something I'm working on right then, or if I was working with you, David, on something, you said, I'm going to send you an email so we can better discuss the meeting we're having right now, then I would go and get that email. Otherwise, I have a very specific time of day that I will go check my emails, add things to my to-do list that may need to go on my to-do list now because of something that was in an email. Otherwise, those are rabbit holes that I found myself all of a sudden. What did you do today? I checked emails. That's what I ended up doing all day, because as I would get to something, I'd be, okay, I got to take care of that. And then in the middle of that, maybe I'd get back to emails because I'm waiting for something or whatever. And all of a sudden, then nothing ever gets done. I would find myself very, very unproductive whenever I would allow myself emails any time of the day. That was just me personally. Like you say, it's customized, has to be customized for the person, but emails became the bane of my existence.
That is a perfect example of time optimization, in that you proactively address the time frame that you're going to work on a particular activity or item, and you stay disciplined around that, versus people who try to manage their time. And again, there's nothing wrong with it, but that tends to be reactive. It's a last in, first out mentality. And email is a perfect example. You could sit there and say, oops, an email just came in. I'm going to answer that email. Oh, look, another one came in. Before you know it, it's an hour and a half later, and you've answered a lot of emails and maybe have a false sense of being productive because you responded to people, but probably most of those are lower level priority items.
Right.
Which you put in front of something that was probably more important to work on.
Yeah, and that's what I would find myself doing. So I had spent an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours on emails. Nothing on my to-do list had got done. Nothing of the things that I really planned to accomplish today. Whenever I made that list at the end of the previous day, nothing had been done. Because when I sit down at my computer, the first thing I did is I looked up at those emails, and that all of a sudden went to the top of the list because I let it.
Correct. Because you were reacting to circumstances that came at your way. And again, you could get some really good things done at that time frame, but then you're still looking at all of the other things that you had left to want to do in that day that could be really high priority items that you now have to invest more time to figure out how am I going to put those elsewhere in the future to get those done.
Yeah, I think that in my case, I am not. I mentioned this before. I am not the greatest time manager or time utilizer. I feel like I am very easily distracted. That it doesn't. I am one of those people that definitely let what's going on in my environment a lot of times, or a phone call that I get, affect the whole rest of my day. A message that may come through on LinkedIn that all of a sudden I'm like, oh, this is the most important thing right now, because it is to me right then, right? It's a funny deal, and I know that I have let things, once you said, procrastinated on things that needed to be happen quicker because I was distracted by things that were happening in the now.
Correct. And I think one of the biggest things I tell people, if you listen and you're like, I've got all three of those challenges or those problems, boy, I'm distracted, I procrastinate, and I get interrupted. Well, the good news is you don't have to work on all three of those at one time. Pick your worst one of those three and say, what do I really struggle with? And if it's distractions, then I know we talked before the episode, Harlan, about our phones are this amazing tool, but they're also the biggest form of distractions.
Yep.
So I quarantine my phone. So for example, my phone is quarantined right now during this episode. Why? Because I don't want to have to avert my eyes to something that comes up, because distractions are my biggest time opportunity that I have to deal with. So if you focus in one area on distractions, putting structure around your day, changing your environment if you need to, whatever you have to do to be a little bit more focused, if you just dedicate just on distractions, over time, you're going to find, well, I'm not procrastinating as much because I'm getting more done. And interruptions aren't coming as much because I've planned my day out and I can negotiate better when people want to bother me for my time. Doesn't mean it's going to be perfect. It doesn't mean you're going to go through the day saying everything I planned is going to end up being, but you're going to put yourself in a position where you get to negotiate your time more when people come demanding your time to solve their problem.
So I don't know if this is part of what you help people work on or not, but I do know that it has made a difference to me, and that is not being afraid to say no when someone asks for my time, but making sure they understand that no is not bad. No doesn't mean anything bad. No just means I don't have the time. No, it really can mean I simply don't have the time to, or at this point I don't, right? No can just be right now I don't have the time to dedicate to that, or give it, maybe I do feel like it's important, but I'm saying no because I can't give it the time that I feel would be important to this particular thing. Is this something that you work on, helping people make decisions with their time to help them better utilize it?
So no, saying no is actually the number 4 problem that people struggle with. And it's because we're naturally inclined to want to say yes. We don't want to disappoint others. We don't want to look in a bad light. We want to look like we're cooperating. But the idea is, saying no is all in how you deliver it. And my process that I work with clients on any of the attributes that they struggle with is I ask them to use the acronym PEC, or preparation, execution, and control. So using how do I say no in particular. First of all, the preparation aspect is you got to know how you want to spend your time. So as I look at the day, I got this planned out. Doesn't mean you won't change again, but you've spent time investing how you want to plan your day. Then as you begin to execute against that day, you then know what are the priority items, and maybe you work in, I always work in some flex time because something might happen where I have to rearrange something. But That flex time is there for then when the control aspect, the last of that acronym PEC is control. When you want to control what's happening, that's when the decision comes in. What's my no? And it doesn't have to be a no. It can be a no, but, or here's an alternative. And one of the things I work a lot when people demand my time is someone comes to me and says, hey, Dave, I need you to work on me with this. I will ask a question, something similar to, okay, so your issue that you need me to invest time with on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being it's not an issue at all, to 10, it's a zombie apocalypse. Where does it fall in there? And usually when they put that perspective, it usually falls between a 5 or less. Then you say, okay, great. Let me talk to you about some alternatives to my calendar where I am going to be available that I can devote the proper amount of time with you. And some of you might be looking, if they're like, well, if they're not an entrepreneur and they're going, well, but I got a boss. Well, the flip side then, if you have a boss, is you then tell the boss to say, hey, I've got these 3 other things I've got to work on. 2 of them, you want me to get these things done right away. I need you to help me prioritize now that you're adding another thing to help me understand what is the most important of these 4 things you need me to do so that I can reprioritize and work on it. So it becomes a negotiation. It's not a hard no, but though sometimes it can be, but it's more of an alternative negotiation because you're confident in what you need to get done.
I love what you said there because it is a negotiation. That's kind of one of the big things I took away right there. It is a negotiation. Maybe they haven't thought of some of the what ifs that you bring to them, some of the alternative solutions, or in the case of if you are not an entrepreneur, but you have a boss, maybe that boss has not necessarily forgotten, but did not realize that you had these other things that were still pending as well. When this came up, he just automatically thought you were the best person for it. That's great that you are the best person for it, right? Make yourself indispensable, but you've got to let me know. Put it back on them. You've got to let me know which is the most important then, because you've given me these other tasks as well. Now, remember, at this point in time, you better be able to answer where you are on those projects because that may be his follow-up question, right? It could very well be, well, where are you at with these? Well, if you give me 3 more hours, this one will be done. I want you to get that done then. That's going to be your priority because you're telling me you can get that done today. Then I want you to work on this that I just told you. And then the other project can be the one you're just starting. This one's more important than that one. Then you work there. So don't go empty-handed. If you're going to give what if, or if you're going to ask somebody else the priorities, you better be prepared to answer some questions yourself.
So true. And that preparation comes out about the fact that I typically coach clients is it's the 30-minute rule, beginning and the end of the day. The beginning of the day, you spend 30 minutes verifying what you want to do in the course of the day and ensure that what you planned out is going to look like what you expect it to be. Then at the end of the day, it's another 30 minutes where you look at how did I do against it? Did I execute and control what I prepared? And then you look at the next day as well and say, how does the next day look? Because it is surprising. I know I've been in a lot of companies and I have clients tell me that, and my clients email me. I have international clients. And so I go to bed, I put my head on the pillow, and in the morning, I could have half a dozen emails from people over in India or Europe who are asking me questions. Well, I didn't plan that when I went to sleep that night. So that's why I'm like, you do the same thing again the next morning. Could be a very quick thing that says the day looks the same, or, oops, I had some things come in overnight. I need to reprioritize.
No, I think that is vitally important. You've got to have a little bit of flexibility. You mentioned that earlier, a little bit of flex time built in there. And now I use a calendar app for people to set appointments with me. One of the things that I had to learn the hard way is originally I didn't build any cushion or buffer on those meetings. And you can do that. If you're using one of those calendar apps, all of them allow you to put a buffer in there. If you don't do that, your day can get real ugly real fast where you have nothing but meetings back to back to back to back to back, and you didn't even give yourself a bathroom break. You didn't even give yourself a chance to get a drink of water or whatever. You gave yourself no opportunity. And if you think, oh, well, not all these meetings will last that long, good luck with that. Well, I can tell you.
So true with adding the buffer, because you never know, particularly if it's a client meeting and you don't have a buffer, but what if it's going well and you know you need another 10 minutes? Golly, you'd hate to say, sorry, I got to let you go. Good conversation. I'll follow up later. Well, what happens in the follow-up? You're working doubly hard to get their attention again. So yes, I think building in buffers, building in breaks in your day, formal breaks. Too many people don't do that. And a break, what I define a break is, it is stepping away from the environment that you are in and doing something else. I take 2 breaks during the day, and I walk the dog around the block. It resets my mind for me to come back in and then either pick up where I left off and with maybe a fresh attitude, or I dive into a new activity or project ready to be engaged because I've been given myself the opportunity to reset and let my brain be more creative.
Yeah, I think that is so overlooked, giving yourself that break during the day. Some people do a great job of it, but there's days, I'll tell on myself, there's days that I end up filling my break time with another meeting. And I shouldn't do that to myself. I really should not do that to myself, because that is the time that you need to keep your sanity.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But I'm telling you, don't do what I do at times. You've got to take that time. You need it. That causes burnout. That causes you not to be as sharp in the rest of your day. Whenever you're trying to have a meeting and all of a sudden you find yourself fading, especially if you're on a Zoom where you're not the only one there and you find yourself wandering or turning and doing something else at the machine and not paying attention. If that's where you're at in this meeting, I'm going to tell you my personal thought of it is, I think you're wasting your time then. I think you're not utilizing your time properly if you're on a meeting where you can be so easily distracted that you don't have to give it your focus.
Another element that's really missed with people, and it's something that I work with clients on, is I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nutritionist, I'm not a physical therapist or a trainer, but personal care is a really unutilized opportunity, particularly for those of us as entrepreneurs, because we juggle so many different hats. And there's 3 elements for me with personal care. One is, we mentioned breaks, take formal breaks. Number 2, do what you can to get at least 7 hours of sleep, ideally 8 hours, whatever you can to get that, because sleep is such an important element to how our body can recharge and be ready for the next day. And then the third element behind that is try to do at least 30 minutes each, 3 times a week. So, half an hour, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, whatever it is, of some type of exercise that gets your heart rate up. And you need to really do more, but I try to if you aren't doing it, start there, because what that does is it improves your distractions. It helps you handle interruptions better. It helps you not procrastinate, because your body is ready to engage more frequently over a longer period of time.
That is such a great piece of advice. The biggest reason, the number one reason why people say they don't exercise is, I don't have time.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's the number one. It's not even close. I don't have time. Well, you're not making the time. You're not scheduling the time. All those things are true. But it is time utilization. And if you're not spending some time with that self-care, then you're very likely going to be spending more time at a physician or
Correct.
If you think your time is limited now, imagine that you've got to go to a physician monthly because of a chronic illness that you have because you weren't taking care of yourself, that you didn't have the self-care. That's a whole different issue. And we see it all the time in the world that I work in and live in. That's something we deal with all the time as people that have situations like that.
The older you get, the more time you're going to have to invest just to minimize the decline. And what I mean by that is you're going to have to exercise harder. You're going to have to watch your diet more. You're going to have to sleep probably a little bit more. The body's just naturally aging. And from that, you used to, when you're in your 20s, you get to improve your 20s and 30s. In the 40s, you're just probably trying to hold serve with where you're at. But then once you hit the 50s and the 60s, it's about how do I minimize the decline in what's going on? Because you just can't do stuff as quick as you used to, or maybe as long as you can. But that's where the personal care element becomes really important.
And if you start those habits when you're younger, it's much easier to maintain those as you get older as well. That's so. In other words, if you're listening to this and you're in your 30s, you say, "Well, I'm already doing these things," or you're not doing these things yet. Maybe it's very sporadic. If you'll set the pace for yourself now, it'll be much easier to continue those things into your 40s and your 50s and your 60s if you already set that pace for yourself right now.
And people, back to your point where you had mentioned, hey, I don't have the time for this. And you're probably thinking a whole host of other areas behind this. One of the things, again, work with clients on is I am a proponent of planning your calendar 2 weeks in advance. And some people might say, I can't plan tomorrow, and he wants me to do 2 weeks. What I want with an asterisk, and what I mean is plan it, what I use as a wet cement analogy. When you're in construction and you lay the cement, there is a period of time you have that you can change it if needed before it totally cures. And so week 1 for me, where you plan, is pretty solid, stuff that you should be pretty good about. Week 2 is very wet cement. You're just establishing a foundation. But in that, I encourage everybody, do both your personal and professional activities on one calendar, or at least a way where you can sync it. So if your employer doesn't allow you to put in personal aspects, then set it up and sync it over to your personal calendar. But do everything there. So you're formally blocking out time for exercise. I have some clients who formally block out time of when they're going to go to sleep, because otherwise they have a tendency to do. So whatever you need, you put it in there, knowing it can change. But if it's there, you're less apt to wing it and more inclined to say, okay, I did say I was going to exercise during this time frame. I better get to the gym.
All right, so I want to switch gears a little bit here because I just had a thought that, because this is the way my mind works, right? How does someone approach a major change in life? And we're not talking about retirement yet. I do want to get there in a few minutes. Like a job change or a responsibilities change, or this is kind of a interesting one. You just had a child, or you just got married, or in other words, a major change in your life into time management. What are some recommendations that you have for someone whose whole world kind of gets turned upside down in some cases? Once again, it can be as simple kind of as a job change or as major as adding a child to the family.
That's a great question. What a great question. And I will just lean into the fact that you have to then adjust your priorities. So many people don't prioritize well. They treat everything equal. For example, I look at a typical client's calendar and I'll see a bunch of meetings blocked off on their calendar with a bunch of open time. So what's going on during that open time? I don't know, I want to work on this, but I said, what happens if you're at 2:00, you want to work on a project and somebody puts a meeting in there? Well, I guess I go to the meeting. The same thing applies holistically in your entire life. Same thing happens. The idea is you want to proactively prioritize what you're doing. What are you going to prepare in life? And if you have a kid, for an example, as a father of 2 kids, wow, that really disrupts things. You may not figure out what it is. So you might say, I'm going to plan everything this way. My first child slept through the night really, really well. My second child, he was 2.5 years old and was still getting up in the middle of the night. I can tell you, whatever I was planning wasn't working well. So you have to understand, within your planning comes adaptation, and start with a plan, but know you're going to adapt, because if you switch jobs, that nature of what you're going to do in that job is going to be different than probably the last job. And it may adapt over time. So you may choose, first part of my job, I'm really going to go gangbusters. I'm going to work, 12 hours a day, but I basically want to wean myself off to something more manageable later. Once I'm set that way, then you're going to have to adapt that. So it's prioritization and adaptation.
Yeah, and I think that's vitally important too for someone who steps out of corporate America into an entrepreneur role or a sole proprietor or whatever that looks like. Even if you're, say, starting a franchise, that franchise is going to have some type of schedule, most likely, that depending on what you're getting into, may have some type of schedule for you, but it's not going to be all inclusive as far as a schedule. You're going to have to be able to, as you mentioned there, David, you're going to have to be able to be flexible and adjust what it looks like for you, because not everyone that is getting the franchise may have the same family dynamic that you have. Some of those people may be single. Some of them may be married. Some may be married with young children. Some of them with adult children. I can promise all of those are going to cause different dynamics with the way that you run your particular business. And so it's vitally important that you put all that together. I love also what you said about one calendar, putting your personal stuff on that calendar as well. I think about when my kids were in school and they would have events that I wanted to go to. If I didn't put them on my calendar and block out that time, then shame on me. It probably was not, I most likely wasn't going to be able to go if I didn't block that time off, because something else would have came up that went into that time.
And if people are going, well, I can't block my calendar off because, I need to be available for such and such. So I say in that response is, you can still put it on your calendar. You just don't have to mark it busy or occupied during that time. You get to visually see it to you. So my calendar, probably about 70% of my calendar is open times. I've got stuff planned during that time frame, but I'm open in case a client or a prospect wants to book a meeting. But I can tell if I have to work on a specific client project, that time is blocked off. So someone can't come in, a prospect or a client, say, oh, I need to talk to Dave for 30 minutes. I'm going to use his calendar link and book it. They won't be able to do it during that time frame. That's my preparation and my proactiveness that says, this is how I've carved that out. You can do the same thing if you work for an employer. You can set up your calendar that same way. And then when I was in corporate life, I would go negotiate with the boss that says, hey, listen, for on Friday from 1 to 4, I need to block my calendar off. I need protected time to complete X, Y, Z. And if you're proactive, in many cases, I never had a boss that said you can't do that unless they had a higher priority item that they needed me to do. And so at that point, it got blocked off. So no one else within the organization, if they went to go try to book an appointment with me, it showed I wasn't available.
Yeah. No, that's great advice. All right. So let's step into then that transition that kind of you work with a lot of folks now, and that is from your working life, whatever that looks like, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you are corporate America, it doesn't make any difference, into retirement. There is this fallacy of thought, I believe, that many people have, that I'm going to have all of this time to do whatever I want to now. But many of the people that I have seen with that end up not doing much of anything.
Right.
I think a lot of times it's procrastination. I've got all this time now, I can do it when I want to. But then they kind of get into this rut of not ever doing anything. I'm going to travel to all these places. and then they don't do it, or whatever, fill in the blank. What does the process look like in general that you help people really reimagine what retirement's going to look like and help them make a plan for their time into that period of life?
So I use a figure called 40%. And what I mean by that is regardless of whether you're in career or you're post-career headed to retirement, if you work a 48-hour-a-week job now, and those of us who are entrepreneurs, that's probably on the low side of what we do, but just to use that as a benchmark, that is 40% of your awake time. So if you're in career, you have 40% where your eyes are open that has a general natural structure tied to it. When you step away from that, if you go to a traditional retirement where you're not going to work, you have to now find 40% more to do with your time. And if you are a person who manages your time well now and you're in career before you head into retirement, it doesn't mean you're going to be better at it because you have to fill this vacuum up. Flip side is if you don't manage your time well now and you head into retirement life, you're not going to get better at it. You're only going to get worse. So there are 6 areas that I work with clients on to develop this post-career strategy. One is reconcile your career mindset. How do you feel about it? And do you still want to work in retirement? Number 2, reconcile your retirement mindset. Do you have a good or bad feeling when someone says the word retirement? Number 3, reconcile your financial mindset. That doesn't mean I'm not a financial advisor, but do you believe what you have? Do you have the right mindset about having enough, or do you think you have too much or too little? The next one is time management, and you're going to manage it different when you're in retirement. The fifth one is, what is your social connections? What's the anticipated lifestyle? Because when you leave work, you're going to lose 50% of your social connections right then and there. And then finally, what's your planned activities? What are you going to do in retirement that's going to bring meaning and value? You work on all those 6 items, and if you plan it out well, you'll have a lifestyle strategy that's adaptable to the changes that's going to happen in your life.
Now that's awesome. I love that. And I'm gonna say this in the fact that I've seen this particular thing happen many times, and that's that social part that you mentioned, that you're going to lose 50%. I have unfortunately seen a lot of folks that lost much more than that because they may not have had any life, as it were, outside of work. And in many cases, that was one of their biggest fears, and they may not have retired at all. I have known folks in some vocations that simply did not want to retire because they felt like they were going to lose any social that they had by walking away from their job, and worked into their 70s, 80s, literally worked until they keeled over.
I've had clients that I've worked with that's the same thing. What I ask someone in that situation is, particularly if you have a spouse, is your spouse in agreement with that? So if you want to work through retirement and it's like, I need work for my purpose, I don't have really anything else out of that, that's great. If your spouse is in agreement with that. But too many times spouses don't talk to each other, and there's unrealistic expectations on both sides. And then the second thing that I ask, even if you want to work in retirement up until they roll you out in a coffin, if that's exactly what you want, are there still other things in your life that you still want to do? And think outside the box. Travel's a typical retirement thing. There are places in the world that you want to go. Then what are you going to do to build in flexibility to be able to do those? And I have people who live the best of both worlds. They do contract work with a prior employer, yet they say, I'm working for the next 3 months. I'm taking the next 3 months off. And then they come back and the employer says, okay, I got these 4 or 5 projects. Whatever you want to do, make sure you have some flexibility so that you can complete some of those personal things that if you think long enough, you'll find some.
Yeah, that's interesting. I talked to someone the other day that they went kind of down the pathway you just mentioned. They got a contract to work in the same area that they'd worked before, with the caveat that they were off the entire month of July and they're off the entire month of January. In both of those cases, they take trips to see family. That's just part of what they do. It is built into their schedule. I'm gone. I'm not doing side projects, not doing anything else. I'm gone. I'll see. I'm out of here on the 31st of December, and I'll be back on February 1. And same thing in July. I thought that was very interesting that they had built that in. And of course, I had no idea where we were going to go with this conversation. This was just something I had talked about the individual about on Friday. And I thought that was a very interesting concept that they had, but it's worked very well for them for a number of years since they retired.
And I love that. And that's okay. If that's what you want to do, if work derives it, don't let anyone tell you you have to retire because it's expected of you. But at the same time, don't deny yourself wonderful opportunities. And also the economics play into it. So if someone's listening to this and they're going, well, I don't think I have quite the finances to be able to retire, then it doesn't mean you have to continue fully with what you're doing. If you work with a financial professional, you can come up with options that says, maybe I need to work full-time until I'm 68, but then I can work part-time until I'm 72, and then I can fully retire. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the hard cutoff date at 62 or 65, but you can look at options that says, well, maybe I can work part-time and still be able to do some stuff that I've always wanted to do.
Okay, so you touched on something there, and I've got a question about someone who is forced to retire, because there are certain professions out there, particularly if you work with the government and you carry a weapon, that they say, hey, you've reached a certain age and you are no longer welcome to be here and it's time to hit the road. It's not just there, but there's a number of professions out there that you reach a certain age and it's mandatory. You're gone. What unique challenges do folks in that situation have that other folks that obviously these folks kind of planned because they knew it was coming, but I think in many cases they didn't plan because it still caught them, I won't say by surprise, but they were in many cases not really ready to retire. So they didn't have the right mindset, because in lots of times they're pretty young still, comparatively speaking. If you want to look at the average age of retirement, they're not to what you would consider retirement age, but they're still kicked out and sent packing, as it were.
I have a cousin that was in law enforcement, and that was the exact same thing that happened to him. He knew it was coming. Typically, those people are what I call ignorers. They simply ignore what's coming, and they're just going to keep going, and I'll handle it when it gets there. What I do with them and other classifications of people who are apprehensive or even militant about retirement is, you need to define a life purpose statement. And that's one of the exercises I take my folks through is define that purpose, and it's greater than work. So don't tell me your purpose is, I like to get up and go do X, Y, and Z. You have to define, if the job was taken away, what's your reason for getting up in the morning, and what purpose do you want to solve? Now, it doesn't mean you can't weave in, like if you say, I love interacting with people or I love to help people. Well, if your job does that as your purpose, then you get to integrate that. But if your job can't be there, then how do you fulfill that purpose? And that once you know that you define the purpose statement, then you begin to think more broadly about things you can accomplish that's outside of work. Again, doesn't negate work, doesn't negate the importance and fulfillment, but it makes you think more broadly about what impact can I bring into the world if I can't work.
So I feel like that same type of process would be very, very good for someone that's retiring from the military as well. There's not always a forced retirement there, but there is this goal of 20 years. And once you have your 20 years plus, or more, you're able to get the full retirement benefits of military. And a lot of folks go for that. They get their 20, 22, 24, whatever, and they step away. But a number of them that I have talked to do not truly have a plan except to retire from the military. And unfortunately, in many cases, whatever they did with the military doesn't necessarily transfer into civilian life either. So they're not necessarily prepared for civilian life. Many of them, especially if they've done any tours of and been in any combat zones, it can obviously have that added on to some of the issues that they have. But what else, other than what you had just talked about making an actual plan, and what does this look like? Putting together that, what am I going to bring to life now? What am I going to do? Many of them still want to work. They want to step into jobs. What kind of advice do you have for someone in that situation?
I have a really, really good friend of mine who was in the military for many, many years. He now owns his own business and also does contract work back with the military. And Arthur is my go-to guy to talk about military. And he's such a great perspective, because I love this example he used. He said, when I left the military, he said, I found myself, I was standing in front of my closet, not knowing what I wanted to wear for that day. Because he said, I didn't have to think about that. I had my uniform, whatever scenario I was in, I had the uniform for that. And he said, I stood in front of my closet trying to figure out my first day going back to work, what that would mean. And then he said, I went in, it was Mr. Jones, Mrs. Smith, and they're kind of like, no, it's John and it's Sally. He said, so what I would recommend, particularly for someone who's in the military, is, and you're thinking about leaving, go back to all your civilian friends and ask these basic questions. When you're at work, how do you call them? What do you call the people you work with? How do you pick your clothes out? What's your day like? And then also go find those folks who've already retired from the military and made that transition and ask them how did they do it. Don't wait to figure it out. Because he said, I felt like an idiot, but he said there were so many times that I was paralyzed with indecision because I just didn't know what was expected of me. And particularly, I've had father in the military, brother and sister in the military, so I get a little bit of the culture. I'm not going to say I understand it all, but the average civilian has no clue the responsibilities and the ideas and the things that anyone in the military, regardless of your title, your rank, or your position that you had in the military, there's some amazing things, responsibilities that mean nothing to a civilian. So the more you prepare yourself to come out of there, the better expectation you're going to be able to manage your time, because you understand the environment you're operating in.
Yeah. And, I think one of the things that I've heard people talk about, especially on the time management side, is they didn't have to manage their time in the military. The military managed their time for them. They knew where they were going each day and what their duties were, because they had their orders and this is what is going to get done today. I don't have to make any decisions on that. This is what I'm being told I need to do today. Now, obviously, there's a little bit of flexibility there depending on the rank that you are. But as a general rule, the military is deciding what your day is going to look like. Now you don't have that. Now you have to decide what your day is going to look like.
Correct. And that's where I go back to get into a mode of preparation, then execute against that preparation, adjust if you need to, adapt, and then control your outcomes. Hold yourself accountable to controlling those outcomes. Put as much structure in your day as possible as you can, particularly if that's what you're used to.
All right, so I'm going to throw this out there, and maybe it's nothing different. Maybe it is. What is the difference between time management and time optimization?
Thank you for asking that. So time management, again, in one word, it's reactive. We can be really, really good at handling those reactions, but it usually means we have somewhat of a first in, first out mentality. Like something comes at us, our way, we're going to get it done. Being time optimization flips the script, and it means you're proactive. You are preparing for what you want to do. You're going to then execute against that preparation. Yeah, I know I'm a broken record. And then finally, you're going to control your outcomes. And it's all based on proactivity. Once you get into that mindset, then again, you are able to negotiate better when people come demanding your time of you, and you're confident to say no. You're confident that you're not going to procrastinate because you know what you have to do.
So it really is actually the difference between the two is about your ability to control your time versus
Correct.
react.
Your desire to want to do that.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. So when we talk about how you regain time, this is exactly how you regain time. Now, we're not making any new time, but we're regaining time because now you're in better control of your time versus the reactionary time management.
That's correct. And I would tell people time feels different for all of us. So, for example, if you go watch a movie or a sporting event or something to that effect that you're really excited about, time can seem like it flies by. Football game, boy, 3.5 hours, it's already done. Now, for me, on a trade show, and as a salesperson on a trade show floor, if it was really slow, holy cow, time seemed like it moved really slowly. That 3 hours could be a lot different than watching a 3-hour movie that I want to do, or 2 90-minute movies. So time flows at the same rate, but we perceive it differently. And time optimization is all about you making time seem like it goes quicker because you're getting more done, so you can then do more as a result.
If you don't think that time moves differently whenever there's nothing happening, whenever things seem to be standing still, think back to 2020. Think about COVID and how long 2020 was. It seemed like it would never end. And now think about post-COVID and where the heck the last 3 years have gone, because they just flew right past. To me, it seems like the last 3 years have taken the same amount of time just 2020 did. And I think it's a direct result of what you just said. When there's nothing going on, and I'm not saying there wasn't anything going on in COVID, but we weren't doing anything, right? We were all just sitting at home doing nothing for the most part. And so time just stood still.
Yes. I love that example. Love that example.
Crazy how, and I haven't talked to anyone who hasn't kind of felt that same way. That since after COVID, whenever you want to decide is after COVID, that time has just flown since that. But it's just because we're back to living our lives now, and so time's back moving the way it should be moving, which it seems really fast anyway. But COVID, it's just almost like the day the earth stood still, right? The old
and that's part of the reason why so many people struggle, because you went from pretty predictable. I want to say COVID wasn't predictable, but you didn't spend your time in much variety as you do now. And so that's where a lot of people really struggle, because I got so many things coming at me. How do I prioritize this? No, COVID example's great. And we're going to be learning a lot about COVID continuously in the years to come, what impact it's had on us.
Yeah, you and I touched on that just a little bit before we started the show. And, my daughter was affected very much by her last 2 years of high school were COVID years. My son's last year of college was COVID year. There's so much that happened during that time. And once again, time management changed dramatically for those kids at that time because nothing was the same. I mean, imagine going to spring break and school never started again. They lived through that. Like we did too as the parents, but not as a student.
That's exactly right.
Insane the things that happened to them. And that was my daughter was at the end of her career, but think of the kids that at any level that still have to get back into and rebuild that time management after a couple, depending on where you lived, as much as 2 years of not attending school.
And what makes that hard, regardless of where you're at, is that, and it sounds counterintuitive, but you have to invest time to use your time better. Yeah. And that's where so many people struggle because they're kind of like, I can't devote a half an hour to this. I can't even manage the rest of my day. But you've got to stop and invest that time, and then you'll find the rest of the time becomes easier for you to be able to execute against.
And I love what you just said right there. You folks, you cannot get a handle on your time and optimize your time unless you take the time to optimize your time.
Correct. Well stated.
I mean, when you really think about it, it's logical, right? It doesn't just happen. You have to put time into it to make it work. The other concept that you gave earlier, I think a lot of folks miss that, and that is planning your day the day before, reviewing your plan the day of, reviewing what happened that day at the end of the day so that you can make a plan for the next day. When you don't do that, every day is just let's roll the dice and see what happens. So today's better than yesterday. Based on
the whole reactive nature of it.
Right. Based on what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. How's today or tomorrow going to be any better than today when you made no more plan than you did any other day? Just having a calendar and putting stuff on it is not making a plan.
You got to work it, just like any plan. If the plan sits on the shelf, it doesn't do any good. Once you get set the plan, work the plan.
It's another reason why people don't reach their goals. Of course, a lot of people don't even set goals, or they set goals that there's two kind of goals, right? That people typically don't reach. Those that they just come up with. Just whatever. Yeah, what's my goal? I'm going to make $1 million this year. Awesome. How you going to do that? I'm going to work hard. That's going to do it. Yep, you got it. Go ahead. See you at the finish line, buddy.
Right. Yeah. And tell me how you're doing from a revenue standpoint.
Right. And what are you doing? Is there any points during the year that you plan on checking your progress? Well, I guess at the end of each quarter, I'll just look and kind of see how much I made during that quarter. All right. There's a way that you once again, if you put no time into developing a plan, you put no time into optimizing your plans, you put no time into optimizing the failure rate's pretty astronomical.
It is. And it's also, I have found, this is myself personally as an entrepreneur, I have to be more patient. I can plan it out as best as I like, but if it's important to me, I will add 20 to 50% more time than what I anticipate. Because every large client that I've gotten has never gone the same. It has never gone the way I anticipated. I always have to negotiate something, adjust something, timelines change. And if I stuck only and was so rigid to my original plan, I wouldn't have gotten that client because I realized I need to just anticipate it's going to take longer and I'm going to have to adapt it.
Yeah. Yeah. Great advice. No client is exactly the same. And it's like you mentioned earlier, everyone's going to have different time optimization issues that they have to overcome. Some of us have all three problems that we have to overcome, but we're not going to tackle all those at one time. So I love that. Another thing that you recently did this year is you released a book. So tell us a little bit about that book, The Time Optimized Life. You are the author of that book. David, tell us about the book and what someone can expect to get from it.
So a lot of the stuff that we've talked about is already in the book. So there's that review on it. But the ultimate thing then there's a free resource that comes with the book. So if you buy the book, you can take the time management analysis. And that is basically the outline of the book. So when you take that, you get your assessment back. And I really highly encourage you, as you dive into the book, make sure you have the assessment next to you, because then you're able to develop this customized plan. So the goal behind the Time Optimized Life, proactively manage your time to your specifications. It's custom to you. And the only tool I recommend for people to use, there's great apps out there. There's great other things that are great if you want to go down that road. But anyone who has an email exchange server has a calendar and task function already built in. Get to know those 100%. And in conjunction with the book, you are going to be able to create your own proactive strategy that fits for you, that's adaptable to the changes that come your way.
And this is not just about work, right? This literally is the time optimized life. So we're talking about even beyond work into your personal life and all of that, whether you're working years, whether you're retirement years. This is how to optimize your time across your entire life.
Correct. And my wife actually wrote one of the chapters in the book, and I really wanted her to be in it. And I have plenty of people tell me that hers is their favorite chapter. Doesn't insult me, but but her idea was she specifically looks at her life holistically and her approach to how she optimizes her time, which is extremely different than mine. So I use real people in 6 of the 10 chapters. They actually give their expertise to a particular section or area. So you just don't hear me, quote, lecturing with you. I actually bring in people who are experts in that area based upon how they self-evaluated, and they help give you their perspective as well. So it's tried to be realistic and practical.
That's very, very cool. So folks, you can go out to infinitylifestyledesign.com. That's infinitylifestyledesign.com. And right there on that page, you can see the Time Optimized Life. You can click on that banner and go to all the different places where that book is available. Can just offhand say it's certainly available at Amazon, Borders, probably any of the places that you may buy your online books. The Time Optimized Life. Once again, we'll view a lot of the things that we talked about today, but certainly go much more in depth. And best of all, personalize it for yourself by allowing you to do the time management analysis. All right. What have I not talked about, David, that you would like to bring to the audience's attention?
I'm just going to reiterate to everybody, if you're sitting there saying, I am struggling managing my time, I just don't, there's so many things I'm trying to juggle to get right. I go back to identify one area that that whether it's distractions, procrastination, whatever behavior that's impeding your ability to proactively use your time, focus on that. Find out what you need to do to be able to improve in that area, and you'll find the rest of your areas that you struggle in will see some natural improvements. Doesn't mean you need to shift and move your focus over at some point, but just start in one area and see that improvement occur.
Yeah, the first step is always the hardest, right? That is always the most difficult.
Correct.
All right, folks, I really hope that you have taken some great things away from this. I know that time management, certainly, I don't know that I'm even to the point where I could call anything I do time optimization yet, but it's certainly one of the things that I personally struggle with. And I know, David, you have given me some outstanding ideas to start down the pathway of taking control of my time and better utilizing it to the benefits of my life, to benefits of my business, benefits of my family, but overall the benefits of my life, because that is exactly what optimizing your time will give you, is back control over your life.
Thank you. It's been an honor to be here, Harlan. So appreciate what you do and the podcast that you offered me a voice today to talk about that.
You're very welcome, sir. It has certainly been my pleasure. Don't forget, folks, go out to infinitylifestyledesign.com and you can learn more. You can also find all locations where you can get the time optimized life. Thanks again, David. Appreciate you being on here with me. Folks, if you would like to subscribe to the podcast, you can go out to hwpowerhour.com. That's hwpowerhour.com. Or, of course, you can keep listening on all of the different podcast locations out there, whether it's Spotify, Apple, Google, any of the regular locations we're on, all of them. Of course, we are also on YouTube. Don't forget, if you want to keep up weekly with all of the industry news in the healthcare and health insurance world, also, of course, talk a lot about health solutions and really anything in the financial services area, you can listen to the Kickstart, 10 a.m. Central Time. That is every Monday morning, 10 a.m. Central, across multiple different platforms. Be sure and connect with me on LinkedIn so that you can get notifications for that. You can find me, of course, at Harlan Pickett, or you can go out to Eagle Care Health Solutions and follow either one of us or both of us there. One other thing, of course, we have our monthly, typically on the last week of the month. Sometimes we even roll slightly into the beginning of the month, like we did in August. But it was such a special show, we had to make that work for Dr. Glover. Why does healthcare suck? That's right. Every month we talk about why does healthcare suck, all the different craziness in the healthcare world that makes it so difficult and convoluted, hard to understand. We don't just point out the problems, but we give you some solutions. So be sure and once again, follow me on LinkedIn, and even please send me a connection request. Love to connect with you. And you can find out when the next Why Does Healthcare Suck is on, and love to have you join us live. Always great to hear what your thoughts are during those events. Thanks again for being with us, and we'll catch you next time on the Health and Well Power Hour. We are out of here.